Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to talk about something a little bit different. Naturally, in any hobby, most people are discussing why you should buy, why you should collect, why you should sell, why you should open a store. Today we're going to do the exact opposite. Today we're going to talk strictly about why you shouldn't sell. More specifically, anybody getting into the game today who's fresh with no experience and minimal capital has no business trying to sell cards. I know it's a very strong claim, but I'm going to just break this down because there's so much more risk today. The market is so much more optimized, and the cost to entry is also increased. So I'm going to break this down to really try and illustrate not only why it's so difficult, but how much has changed within 2 years. So when I started making videos about 2 years ago, it was just a completely different landscape than today. And this is one of my favorite variables about economics, markets, life in general, is that time is necessary for understanding. So if we go back to 2016, we had that massive re-entry with Evolution's 20th anniversary, Pokemon Go. It brought back a lot of those people from the original gen who wanted to continue that 90s experience. But I think the biggest variable most people overlook is that availability was different and you had a lot less people selling. You have so many more people selling today, and what does that mean? Availability is naturally going to increase. So the best way to illustrate this is PSA 9 Shadowless Charizard. It was at $2,500 when about 1 to 2 copies were available. Now it's about $1,000 less because there's 10 copies, give or take, available all the time. And that's that natural supply and demand. You have an increased supply, even with the same demand, it's going to naturally dip a bit in price. So a lot of the set cards have settled. You know, when I'm saying a lot of cards in general have settled, we're usually talking about English set cards because that's the largest data pool with the largest amount of activity. And that overall has settled from 2016. Now keep in mind, a lot of people will be like, oh, these cards keep dropping in price. It's like, yeah, because they went up like 1,000%. You know, some of them were at like a couple $100 and then they went to the thousands and now they settled at $1,000. It's like, that's still a massive growth. Retraces and settles, or whatever you want to call it, a card settling is just a natural occurrence in any market. You know, you can't have constant never-ending erection growth because that's not healthy. You need to see a doctor after 4 hours. You don't want that. That's not something you want. And the only way you can really experience that is by buying the best of the best. I mean, the Honus Wagners, Mickey Mantle rookies, you know, illustrators go on the line. The cards that continue to go like that are because they're so difficult to acquire. And that acquisition is the real challenge. So when that acquisition isn't that difficult for a lot of this stuff, it's probably not going to consistently increase, especially consistently exponentially increase. And this is one of the biggest morsels I wanted to give you. I've touched on it in Patreon multiple times now. But I think one of the best ways to illustrate this idea, not only of growth, not only of opportunity, not only of risk, is that there are so many large stores today in the game selling cards, like DA Card World, Blowout Cards, places that were really sports, I would say, businesses. They mainly sold sport cards. You know, they didn't do that much non-trading card games or non-sport cards. Where today, these stores are doing Pokemon as a staple. In fact, they are dictating a good percentage of the modern market, of the set card market, even sealed product. So the number one thing I can give you is when you make that casual purchase, remember that casual acquisition, like let's say it's an Abra or Rattata or whatever it is, there's someone talking to a camera who has more Abras, you have a PSA 10 than you do. There's someone talking into a camera who has more Rattatas than you do. There's a store or business out there that is adding zeros not only to the quantity of the purchase you made, but also the capital that you can spend. So when you're making that just casual acquisition, you're expecting it to just blow up and go up in price. That's just a narration. That's a fiction. It doesn't occur. The only reason that occurred for those people who were first to market is, again, exponential increase in buyer pool, small availability, naturally going to have that exponential growth. Now you have that availability is just beyond anything it's ever been. And probably the worst offender for this guy. This is by far the worst offender. In fact, in my Patreon videos, I close with an overrated and underrated at the end of the video. And PSA 10 Crystal Charizard has a VIP box seat in the overrated section of that video because that card was at $4,500 2016 and has done nothing but decrease. I think right now it's at $1,800. And that's the best card from the set. And meanwhile, the box is just going through the roof because it's so scarce. I think it's like $8,000 or $9,000. and the top card is going down, you usually don't want to see that gap. You usually don't want to see this like continuous like alligator mouth. You want to see it like more like this. Obviously, sealed product is a different animal. If you go to sports like an 86 Fleer box or like a 79 OPG, they definitely become like these historic enigmas that you can't really quantify, you can't really calculate, but your top card shouldn't just keep diminishing. 86 Fleer Jordans are not going like this. And even if they do dip a little bit, it's usually going to be a peak and valley type movement. It's not going to just be a constant roller coaster ride or a constant just dive bomb. So Crystal Charizard's a worst offender right now. And I remember saying this throughout so many videos. I'm just looking at how many are available. I'm like, yeah, this card's going to keep going down. When there's like 10 PSA 10 Crystal Charizards, there's like 2 of them going at PWCC auctions while there's still 10 listed. All that's going to do is drive the price down. So all those people who, they're like investing in Charizard and things like that, it's real easy to say things. It's real easy to get caught up in, a trend or what's happening, hop on the hype train. But at the end of the day, that data is really what's going to maneuver, and that experience is what's going to maneuver you through, that risk. So, it's a little more abstract. I'm not just sitting here saying, okay, why you don't sell is because X, Y, Z, because, this is a very abstract thing we're doing. But at the end of the day, this is why I tell people, collect what you enjoy. If you come in here and collect what you enjoy, if you don't come in at a sprinter pace, if you don't have a ton of capital, to minimize that risk, collect what you enjoy, because you need to build that experience and knowledge, because that's what's going to navigate you. The people who are buying at the peak of Crystal Charizard at the $4,500 price, they simply didn't have that experience, or they simply won the card, which is fine. But people who are doing that to make a move, if you had the experience and knowledge, you'd be like, hang on, this card was printed to be sold on shelves nationwide. I feel like I'm always taking crazy pills when people are like throwing like $5,000 or $10,000 in the set cards that aren't first edition base. I'm like, is it the really hard card to grade in the set? Because if it isn't, there's like a store out there with like probably 10 of them. And I'll give you a real example, going back to those stores who put zeros on the quantity. I think there was a store, was it Graded Power? I think it was Graded Power who had, it was like 40 Expedition Charizards. That's like quadruple the entire market availability. And that guy's like, yeah, we're going to buy 40 of those. I think people just don't understand that this is just the nature of cards that were intended to be mass produced. And sure, contextualizing that E-Series is scarce, but it's like, scarce is not rare. I've talked about this before. Scarcity and rarity are not the same thing. So this, in a nutshell, is why it's very difficult to enter the hobby now. If you go back to like 2014, the cost to entry was low. The risk was pretty much non-existent. As long as you just stick around, pop on E4, just browse whatever, gather some information here and there, you're going to be okay. Where today you can't do that. Today you cannot casually just autopilot your way through this hobby if you're trying to sell cards. More importantly, the other thing I wanted to give you is that when you have a saturation of product and also a saturation of sellers, naturally it self-corrects. Like we had this boom with low availability, and then what happened, the availability grew, and then that starts to naturally retrace the price. But what you'll see is with the saturation of sellers is that's probably going to self-correct down the road. But in Pokemon, unfortunately, this is one of my biggest gripes. Pokemon definitely has a maturity issue because a lot of people are younger. If you look at Magic, not only is the hobby older, but the average age is older. So that means 2 things. 1, hopefully they're more mature. That's to be debated. But 2, the bigger aspect is increased consumer income. These people understand what a career means, what a job means, what long-term wealth means, even in a very basic way. So therefore, there's not this constant exodus of like you buy a card and you flip it a month later. You buy this top card with the top grade and you're like, all right, let's send it over to PWCC so I can make like a quick $1,000, $100 or whatever. You don't have as much of that. And even when you do have those big stores constantly selling product, there's still a need in Magic. You need cards to play, to fill a deck. Where in Pokemon, it's a different landscape. So if you try to go that route of just constantly fire selling, this is what the outcome is going to be. So in closing, the cards that have really continually grew and had that constant, erection growth there is the rarest of the rare are those exceptional cards like the PSA 10 first edition base Charizard, Typhlosion 17, the Yanma. There's just something it has to have that very difficult aspect to it. Again, you can't have that general acquisition and expect that constant growth. But more importantly, people need to understand that constantly selling stuff is not how businesses operate. And what I mean by that is like constantly doing these auctions, constantly dumping and flipping cards. That's why one of my earliest videos, I'm like, if the majority of the market is comprised of flippers, it will go to shit, because all you're doing is fire selling product. It's like when you see those stores going out of business and they're like 50% off everything, 70% off everything, 90% off everything. That's what a lot of stores are doing. They're constantly cycling, like these guys who are just individuals and they are buying a card and selling it a month later. You know, they're constantly going in circles because that's fire selling. That's not being a business. You know, there's no strategy, there's no structure there, there's no patience there. So you really need to understand the game today. If you don't already have some inertia, you need to build some inertia. You need to let opportunity present itself over time. Remember, time is a necessary variable. It's a necessary variable for understanding. It's a necessary variable for success. That's why people always say patience is a virtue, because you need to navigate through time. It can't be instant. There's too many people right now trying to force that opportunity, and all it's doing is just self-saturating. It's saturating themselves, it's saturating the market. So there you go. We're in a time of saturation. I touched on this with another video, how that's just the key. That's the key, the nemesis. It's not modern cards versus vintage. It's just simply saturation. And we're experiencing that right now if you're trying to be a new seller. So there you go, guys. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully you enjoyed the heavily purple background with all the Abras. Unfortunately, you can't teleport back to 2012. It is what it is. It's heavily optimized today. Maybe if there's a dip at some point, the landscape will change again. But, you know, I'm just trying to give you my impression as of now. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts, and that's pretty much it. Till next time.